Hi, and welcome to our Ranger Patch 9 build guide. For this build guide, we will be building a Ranger for group play and not solo play. Um, the group that I have chosen is Lae'zel and Shadowheart for our two frontliners, and Will for our secondary damage dealer. Feel free to choose who you want. Just do note that if you do pick up Asterion for your second damage dealer, you may not want to worry about sleight of hand or uh, well, Stealth's still a good pick, but yeah, you wouldn't need sleight of hand because he's going to be more proficient at it than you. But because I have chosen to run a group without him, I am picking up sleight of hand. Before we get into the build, though, I would like to go over the three pillars of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, why are we talking about Dungeons and Dragons? Um, because Baldur's Gate 3, the gaming system, the rule set that it is based on, is Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. So it's going to help us to have a little bit of understanding of that game when we're building a character. Now, Dungeons and Dragons has three pillars. That is combat, social, and discovery. Those are the three areas in which your character will participate and help your group. Now, for this build guide, we are focusing, on combat as our primary, discovery as our secondary, and social as, well, less important. We'll be able to provide some social help, but we're not going to be that great at it. And why have I chosen those? Well, one, dexterity is a great combat stat. It's going to give us a great number of resources towards finesse weapons and ranged weapon damage and the ability to hit. It also gives us some additional armor class with light and medium armor. And wisdom, which is our secondary stat, although for this build you really don't have to worry about wisdom because none of the spells that we are choosing are going to require a spell save. But wisdom is a good stat for discovery. Now moving on, now that we've gone over that, hopefully that'll clarify why we're making some of these choices. And when you make a build, kind of remember that those are the three areas that you can participate in this game. So, like if you're making a bard and you're thinking, man, I really wish I had more damaging abilities, well, you could really excel in the social aspect and hopefully open up new dialogue or maybe talk your way out of a fight that's usually pretty difficult. Like the Gith fight, you could succeed at some of that stuff. So there's a lot of options there on how you can play your character, and the bard would be a good one to take heavy into the social aspect of the game. So let's move on with our ranger build. And we're going to start with the origin. I've chosen charlatan. Now there's a couple of ways we can get sleight of hand, but I have chosen to go with charlatan to pick up sleight of hand because it gives us two things. It gives us sleight of hand so that we could pick locks and disarm traps and maybe pick a few items from an unguarded vendor just to pad our pockets a little bit. And it also gives us deception, which deception is our only social skill that we have. It does help us participate. And remember, when you select a background, the choices that you make in the game that kind of relate to that background, like if you use deception in a social situation to get past something, there's a good chance you'll get inspired. And inspiration allows you to re-roll some bad rolls. So keep that in mind when selecting a background for a character. It does have an effect, or how you play the game does have an effect on that background and the benefits you can get from it. Now let's go over our race. For this build, we have chosen the classic Wood Elf Ranger. Wood Elf brings a lot for Ranger. You get the +2 to Dexterity, which is great for us because, well, Dexterity is going to be our main stat. We do get some proficiencies, but we already pick up proficiencies in those weapons with being Ranger. so that's not a big necessity. Dark vision, helping us to see in the dark or the underdark. That's a nice add. I really love Fey ancestry not being able to be put to or so we don't get put to sleep. Um, Early game, I think that's a big problem. As you move on later in the game, it's not such a big deal. And then advantage on saving throws against being charmed. So those are some good adds defensively. Uh, Base race speed, 10.5 meters, which is the highest you can have starting out in the game. That's going to help us keep distance from our enemies. And then maybe if you're building a uh, dex-based melee build, it's also good for closing the distance between your enemies. Mask of the Wild. This is where we're getting our stealth proficiency. Like I said, we're going to be filling the role of Astarion with this ranger, and being able to sneak. And even if you do take Astarion, being able to sneak up on your enemy and hit him with an arrow once maybe combat started for Lae'zel, but you're still hiding, and you can still sneak and get into a better position and shoot before you bring yourself into combat. We get a +1 to wisdom. Not too necessary for the way we're building, but that does help us with our discovery pillar, so it's definitely another good add. Another good choice could be Drow. Drow gets a +2 to Dex as well, and Fairy Fire at level 3. Appearance. Pick your favorite. This is just what I went with. Class. Of course, we're going Ranger. That's why it's a Ranger build guide. It'd be kind of awkward if I was doing a Ranger build guide and pick Paladin, wouldn't it? So some of the features in Ranger. Favorite enemy. Good God, they really need to work with this. I really would like them see. I would really like to see them do a lot more with it. Bounty Hunter is an okay choice, but I'm not going to be running Ensnaring Strike. So outside of the investigation proficiency, not really getting much from it. Keeper of the Veil. Protection from good and evil. That's a great skill, but it requires concentration. So if you're running Hunter's Mark, Ensnaring Strike, or Spiked Growth, you can't have it up. So is it really good? So looking at the proficiency, it's Arcana. Arcana is great, depending on your build. The other thing that I want to point out about favorite enemy, we're a Dex and Wisdom class, but yet all these proficiencies that they're giving us are intellect based. Investigation, intellect based. Arcana, intellect based. Arcana again, intellect based. I believe history is intellect based. And religion's intellect based. Mage Breaker, True Strike is an absolutely waste of time. Don't take it. There are better options, and here's why. If you're, let's say you're not taking the Hag's Gift and you have an 18 Dex. At level 5, that gives you a +9 to hit with +4 from your skill, +2 from archery, and then a +3 from proficiency. So you're going to have a +9 to hit. So against the 20 armor class, you have a 50-50 shot. So without True Strike, you're going to hit 5 out of 10 in a 5-round combat. Because at level 5, you'll have 2 attacks. But if you're using, if you're using Mage Breaker, you get a 75% chance to attack, and it lasts for 2 turns. But as soon as you hit, it's gone. So let's say you cast it, you attack. You only have a 75% chance to hit. You're not guaranteed to hit. So there's a good shot that you'll only hit 4 times. Without the spell, we were doing 5. So it's a complete waste. If you're wanting advantage on an attack, go up to Bounty Hunter and pick up Ensnaring Strike, because when an enemy is ensnared, it is you gain advantage when it's restrained. So that would be the better route. Now, Ensnaring Strike, the problem that I have with it and why I don't run it is because most of the mobs that I want to ensnare that have the really high hit points range usually have a pretty decent strength roll. Um, so it's like you shoot, it doesn't take. You shoot, it doesn't take. Even with the advantage, I had issues with it. Ranger Knight is good if you're making a strength-based ranger, and you would do a strength-based ranger if maybe you were doing a dual wielder and taking the dual wield feat. So this would give you some better options if you're kind of bringing your decks maybe down to a 12 or a 14, which 14 you can still wear medium on armor and get a pretty decent buff out of it. Sanctified Stalker, to be honest with you, I think Sacred Flame is probably one of the worst cantrips in the game. If you've played with Shadowheart any amount of time, you know that because it's like a 50% chance to hit. Really don't feel it's worth it unless you're looking for the religion proficiency. Down in Natural Explorer, went ahead and picked up the fire resistance. We could have went with Urban Tracker to pick up our sleight of hand proficiency, but I went with Charlatan to pick it up that way so that I can get some fire resistance. That's probably going to be one of your more common damage types that you'll come across. Poison would be your secondary, and then cold, unless they shoot a frost arrow or a frost spell at you, you're not going to run into it a whole lot as of patch 9. Beast Tamer, that could be fun, but I'm going the hunter route with this build, not Beastmaster, and once you get up in level, the pet kind of goes pretty quick in combat. You could use it for scouting if you wanted, but that's totally up to you. Again, we went with Wasteland Wanderer for fire resist. As far as skills, I picked up Athletics, because eventually we're going to find ourselves in melee, and this will help us from being shoved, give us a little bit of defense there. Insight to help us detect lies. There are a few times this does come up, so it does help with our discovery or social. It's a little of both right there. Investigation, that's discovery. That'll help us figure things out, and that is an intellect skill. Nature, again, intellect skill. There's a few conversations in the druid camp that the nature skill check does help out. Perception. Now let's take a minute and talk about perception. Perception is the number one proficiency. You will use perception more than any other proficiency. It's if you could take an expertise, I would take expertise in perception. But yeah, you will use perception nonstop. So if you can get it, take it. It is well worth it. Stealth again to sneak around. Now feel free to move these around to whatever your playstyle is. I was just trying to explain why I was taking it. Survival, just outside the druid camp, there is a skill check for that. Animal handling could be kind of fun. Again, up to you. Pick your favorite. Ability scores. Now, if you notice, I didn't dump stat any of them. I tried to keep 10 across all of them. And we'll just kind of do a brief overview. Strength, really going to affect how far we can jump and how much we can carry. If you're worried about carry weight, remember we're playing in a group, so you just move some of the items that you're not going to be using to somebody else and let them to help carry the burden. Also, as far as food items and stuff like that, send those to camp. If you're playing solo, just send everything that you're not going to use immediately to camp. And then you can sort it out later. And then Dexterity, again, our main stat. I went with 17 because I do plan on um, getting the Hag's Gift, and that'll bring us up to 20 with a +2 from our ASI at level 4. If you choose not to help the Hag, I would drop that down to a 16, because if you notice, the odd stats don't give you a bonus. Like, you don't get a bonus to the skill until you hit an even number. So a +2 will take us to 18, so that'll give you 2 more points. Yeah, that's no point there, but maybe we want to bump our strength back up. So or maybe you want a little extra help there, or maybe intellect's a big thing for you. I don't know, but I would move those 2 points somewhere else. Constitution. Constitution helps us with our hit points and our Constitution saving throws. And that's about it. Intellect. I do not want to dump stat intellect, and here's the reason why. I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. If you've played Dungeons and Dragons, you pretty well have a good idea why not. But we're starting the game knowing that we have a Mind Flayer in the storyline. We're on the Nautiloid. There's Mind Flayers. We've got a little tadpole in our eye. Sorry about the spoiler if you haven't played. But the Mind Flayer's method of attack is psionics, and psionics are intellect saving throws. So if you dump stat intellect, you pretty well give them a +2, or you a -2, or -1, I suppose. Yeah, that's a -1, right? Yep, -1. I'm sorry. You give them a +1, or you a -1 to make your save. So with that in mind, I really don't want to dump stat intellect, because trying to think of the future when this game is at full release, yeah, Mind Flayers are not something you want to be strong and dumb at. They will definitely take advantage of a low intellect score. Wisdom is our secondary stat, and to be honest with you, we could drop this down to a 13, a 12, or even a 10, although I think you need at least a 12. I'm trying to remember as far as spells learned. You definitely don't want to dump it down. It does have an effect on your spells learned. The higher that stat is, the more spells you can learn as you level up. But we went with a 14, and that's going to give us a +2 to our perception skill, because we have proficiency. It'll also give us another +2 to insight. So that helps us out there. Charisma, I went with 10. Again, I don't like negative numbers. And that's our social skill, main stat for social. As you can see, deception, intimidation, performance, and persuasion all linked to that. And that's our build. Please feel free to comment if you have questions, or if perhaps I missed something, or maybe you want to share your brief discussion on maybe some ideas you have for Ranger, or maybe something you would like to see. Until the next time, have fun and keep gaming.